Hey there, and welcome back to Laodicea, one of Turkey's great historical and biblical sites. Today we're making our way to the city's water source. We're starting, however, at the South Agora Street. This street is one of the major streets that connected the main part of town with the South Agora, and then of course on further to the stadium. Right next to the stadium is where the water came into the town, and that's where we're headed. But I figured we'd at least start here and take a look at what this was like as we get further and further away from the central portions of the town. We've got some main sections of the street that are, I guess we can say, excavated, and it heads on south this way here, and this is how we get ourselves to the water source of the town and the stadium, which is right next to it. In this portion here, the southern section, there was a lot of just regular residences, regular houses that opened up right onto the street. And then there was also a sewage system right here that, of course, carried the sewage out away from the city. So fairly complex systems were set up, of course, to keep the people healthy and to keep things not stinking, I suppose. But it's just interesting to note, this is the residential area. Back where we looked at yesterday in the previous episode, that's more the commercial zone, and we're just kind of getting a sense for what life was like during those times. We're going to walk on down this way now. We're heading south, and we're going to head down that way and see what we can find along the way as we head towards the city's water source. I'm interested in going down this way because I want to get a little more of an idea of what was really meant when the Laodiceans were called lukewarm. And hey, there's nothing that'll get us closer to that understanding than maybe the water source. And I suppose I should give you a bit of a clarification on that. We're not going to the actual source where the water comes up from the ground. What we're doing is we're going to the main area where the water came into town and then was distributed. So we're going to, I guess I'm just going to still call it the water source. It's just where the water entered town and then of course was brought this way and that. And they have water towers. They had water towers, I should say. And they had a whole bunch of other good complex systems for distributing this water. But they were called lukewarm, and I'll read the actual text in a moment, but they were called lukewarm, and that for some reason, it just immediately, not without even looking at too many details, it just sounds a little bit discouraging. It sounds a little bit like almost well, I mean, the text also says, I wish that you would be hot or cold, but since you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. So that's obviously a negative connotation. There's not much else not many other ways to interpret that. This is really nice because we've got these yellowish flowers here, these pale yellow flowers, and I can hear the bees a-buzzing. That's really cool. I just hope I don't disturb any of them, and I hope they don't sting me. But we're gonna come up here on this this streetway, see, it's blocked. There's a cable there. They don't want you walking into it. And while this certainly can come across as quite discouraging, I will spit you out of my mouth. That's quite, oof, that's bad. I promise though, in the end, we're gonna have loads of encouragement. Look at this. This is amazing. I love this. It looks like they've got a nice blockade area for the work that they're doing. I'll just have to walk around it, and that's just fine. I couldn't resist stopping and getting a shot here of these guys working because I'm able to get kind of close to whatever this structure is. And then of course they're in the background. Everything's backlit, so nothing is like super awesome, but it is gonna make for a couple of cool shots just to showcase the ongoing work that is continuing here. So unfortunately, I was only able to get the one photo because some guy came over and said, hey, no photos. So I'm moving on towards the stadium area and the water distribution center here. Well, I found the stadium, and of course, this would be, I'm gonna assume that's the aqueduct behind me. I still have yet to reference the map, but let's face it, we got archways, we've got things going this way. Down yonder, I see a sign. That's supposed to be where the water distribution center is. And this is just really cool. I love not only just the indentation, but still the scattered rock. We're gonna find something good here to talk about and to photograph, especially with these archways. I love how these things are just, and especially that further one, it just seems like there's just a little bit precariously perched there, where it is gravity that's holding them together, gravity that's holding it all, keeping it firm. And this is certainly where, when we have earthquakes, which there were several earthquakes that came through, there was one in 60 I've been talking about, one in I think it was 494 AD, and then another one in the early 600s, and that was the one that pretty much people gave up and they just moved out down a little more towards present-day Denizli. And when your construction is like this, I can kind of understand how that would be problematic with an earthquake. All right, gonna get some pictures made and keep going on as we head towards the city's water supply. I guess I stand corrected. This structure with the archways is listed on the map as the gymnasium, which I guess makes kind of sense since it's right next to the stadium. And I studied the map last night. I just wish I could have remembered that. Of course, I'm now thinking I'm standing right below this archway. And if, something were to shift or whatever, it would be squished like a bug for me, that's for sure. But these kinds of structures, they're just so cool because they not only provide cool design elements. I'm always looking for interesting compositions and interesting something related to design or that kind of thing, lines, shapes, texture, all that good stuff. But also, of course, it gives just a little more insight to the whole point of people having been here so many centuries before. Just some kind of connection, maybe, is a good way to put it. And this isn't something that I'm really good. I've spent the last 30 years of my life trying to pursue excellence in communicating in the visual space. And when it comes to crafting words, it feels like a little more of a struggle for me. So let's go ahead and make some more pictures and have me become a little more silent on this topic and just express what I'm trying to get across through these pictures. So I've made it here to the city's water distribution system, and what's really incredible is the fact that right here we have a very complex system that transfers water and is pressurized, but transfers water to the different locations, whether it's private homes, whether it's the public baths or the stadium. All these different types of places are going to be receiving water from this location here. In his local setting book, Colin, he states that the city didn't have any natural springs. Of course, this is what they did instead. The Lycus River also dries up in the summer, or at least it gets really low if it doesn't fully dry up. And so this is why they built these items. Today, if you're looking on the map, the river is called the Aksu, A-K-S-U. Also today, to serve the city's water needs, there's a nearby reservoir. There's a dam that was built, and now this reservoir supplies all the water needed for Denizli and the surrounding areas. Ancient Laodicea contrasts its neighbors, Hierapolis and Colossae. Hierapolis having the hot water, the springs that naturally boil up from the ground. And then Colossae, they're at the foot of the hills, and they have a natural, just good springs. I don't know if we call them springs, creeks, rivers, what have you, always supplying their needs with water. So without a natural spring source, this is what Laodicea had to do. And so they brought in water. It goes directly south, and they brought in water from what is present-day Denizli. However, I should note there are a few, maybe I can call them conflicting ideas on where the water comes from and why the Laodiceans were called lukewarm, because in his book, Stefanovic reports that the water comes from Hierapolis. Well, Hierapolis is the opposite direction. So for them to do that, they would have had to pipe the water around and then come up from the south for some reason. This is something, again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, and I'm not going to call these people wrong, but we do have two sources, Hemmer and Stefanovic, claiming two different locations for the source of water for Laodicea. What we do know is that the city's water supply wasn't very clean. It would cause vomiting. It could make you sick if you were to drink it directly. It was also not something that was cool or hot. It was fairly tepid, even though another thing I need to make sure we're clear on, we don't have any direct commentary from the ancient world commenting specifically on how this water is fairly tepid or lukewarm. It's just something that is believed to be the case due to the nature of how the water was brought to the city. So it's time now to take a few photographs. I'm going to start off actually by taking a picture of the pipes themselves. We have some exposed pipes, and this is, maybe we could say, is to satisfy our friend's request, because I got a request last night from a friend who said, can you provide evidence of the clogging pipes? And I think we can do that. We've got the clay pipes, and then we've got some evidence of some elements, some calcium, I'm going to call it. It might be something else in addition to calcium, but some deposits that are inside that clay pipe. And of course, that's just choking it off. That's really cool. And we got several pipes doing that. There's several water lines running here. You know, with this being the kind of thing that just really impresses me or just gets me excited, probably the best way to put it, it's important for me to also slow down and stop and just say, okay, you like a kid in a candy store, but let's do what we can to make sure we make some good photographs. Let's make sure we're doing what we can to communicate most effectively the image that we need to communicate, the message that we need to communicate through this image. That's the most important part. And the nature of, again, the nature of the water and how it came into the city, it came in being rather lukewarm because it either came from Hierapolis and it cooled down as it came down from the hills, from those hot springs, or it came from some source down in Denizli area and it came up here, and it likely would have then warmed up a little bit as it's flowing this way. Regardless, whichever way it happened, the water itself was a little bit on the lukewarm side, and also it was something that didn't taste too good because of the minerals that are in the water. All right, I better get to making some pictures, and then of course we'll be showing them here to you as well. We've learned a little bit now about the historical context, the ideas of the water and what it was all about back in the 1st century through the roughly 7th century, and the challenges that they had and how they met those challenges while bringing that water in. But I've been talking about too, they were referenced, they were called by Christ himself, they were called lukewarm. Let's see exactly what the Bible says about that. So we're going to read from Revelation 3:15 and 16, which says, I know all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Wow. So because you're this putrid, whatever, just this water that is not tasteful at all. You're like this water. I'm going to spit you. I'm going to reject you, the Lord is saying. That's pretty tough stuff. That is a judgment being passed. However, it is a prediction of a judgment that's going to be passed. It's not a judgment that has or is being passed. In the last episode, we learned about the Laodicean church members and how they were instructed to buy gold. That comes in the very next verses. They were to buy gold, white garments, and eye salve. And so today we've stepped back 2 verses to the area that is addressing them just before the fix, as it were. I wanted to start with that idea of the fix because that seemed a little more punchy, that seemed a little more right to the point. But of course, it's always important to know the whole context, and that's what we're doing today here. And as I think I mentioned before, there is no known direct record of someone saying, from that time, whether it's one of the historians or what have you, saying, yes, in Laodicea, the water was putrid or the water was warm or whatever the case. It's just I think we're able to surmise, we're able to understand that that was the case. And because that being the case, this would be a reference, this would be a claim, a charge maybe that we should say, that would make sense to them. They would understand this. So the idea of being hot, that's the idea where many scholars are saying, we're looking at the idea of, hey, you have enthusiasm and you have zeal for the things that are good. And if you're cold, the natural idea is to say, well, you must be against something. You must be really just, you don't like it at all, kind of an idea. And it's interesting because basically what they're being told is, I can work with you if you're either of those, but if you're neither of those, that's where it's difficult to work with you. On a spiritual note, what's happening here, according to Stefanovic and other scholars, the Laodiceans are being chastised for their state of lukewarmness or compromise. That's one of the most dangerous words probably to think about when we're thinking about our spiritual walk. When we make a compromise, we're giving a foothold to the opposition. And that is something that is definitely, the Laodiceans needed a warning about that. They had become complacent and they had started to compromise. They were divided between Christ and the world, the desire to serve Christ and the desire to serve the world. And maybe I would even go so far as to say they weren't really aware of that division. I know in my life, there's been some times where I feel like things are going just fine until, I don't know, something happens or some other element shines light onto onto something that's going on. It's just like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. And so it's possible that their spiritual indifference wasn't really something they were thinking about, because when you're indifferent, let's face it, you're apathetic. You don't really care about things. So the Lord is calling them out and saying, you don't care about things, but you should. And I think that's something that's hugely important that we can apply today as well. So let's let this percolate a little bit while we take a few more pictures. I'm actually going to head down to the very edge of the property where the water would have come in to the city here. At least I'm going to walk down to the fence of the present day edge of the property. It would have gone much further, of course. So I'm going to walk down there. I'm going to walk a little more around the stadium, and we'll get a little more sense of the place here on the southern edge of Laodicea as we walk about and take a few more pictures. Looks like we've got a cemetery down here. I'll get a few pictures of this, but this certainly won't be something I concentrate on, nor am I going to walk around in it. Things seem to be rather scattered, but also I'm just not familiar with the norms in this culture for walking about a cemetery. So I'm just going to play it ultra safe. There's an amazing tree there, however, so I think I will use that as a compositional element, and then we'll move back on up towards the stadium and continue on from there. Here we have the stadium where lots of some type of activity would happen, sport and such, competitions of some sort. Looks like we have a little path that sort of is a path, goes right down into the middle of it. I think that's what I'll do. Up on the edge here, I've got some people that are in bright orange clothing that will stick out like a sore thumb if I get them in my composition, but I'll do what I can to work with that. They probably won't be there long. A couple of nice yellow flowers. I don't know that I'll get many photographs here. Right now anyway, I'm not seeing anything that's particularly interesting to photograph, but at least it certainly is definitely interesting to be here. And maybe I need to be on the ridge though, because then I'll probably be able to look over the area here and get the rest of the city up behind it. So I think that's what I'll do. Get up here on the ridge. Yeah, I'm not going to get high enough to get the city behind it, but that gymnasium section there, that is going to be kind of cool. And those folks in the orange, they're moving on. So I'm going to get something I think that works here. Whatever this structure is, it looks exciting. It has more archways, and I love a good archway. Let's go see what this is. This would be the West Baths. That's awesome because, well, hey, they were clean people. I love a good bath. But what I'm really talking about when I say it's awesome is they have the three areas: the caldarium, the tepidarium, and the frigidarium. The hot, the lukewarm, and the frigid water. With these archways, with the tumbled over blocks, I'm gonna find something here that's really good, I'm sure.